Hi Leah, how are you? This is my first Facebook Live. I'm very excited. Hi everyone, welcome. Looks like we have a comment section over here, so if you have any questions while I'm talking, please feel free to put them in there, and I'll do my best to get to everyone and answer what I can. I'm in Minnesota here. It's kind of rainy, but it's getting warmer, so we'll take that. Hello, Andrew. Thank you for having me. I was just telling Leah this is my first one. I'm really excited. This is a technology I'm not familiar with. All right, I got 2 more minutes here. If you're just hopping on, like I said, there's a comment section here. So feel free to real time ask questions. Personal stories, feedback, anything like that is super appreciated. I want this to be as much of a group discussion as we can possibly make it. Hi there, Deb. Thanks for stopping in. Perfect, Andrew. Yes, people can find me on Twitter at Laura Strait 21. Same with Instagram, Laura Strait 21. And I am Laura Strait on Facebook. But yeah, let's go ahead. I'm seeing 11 my time here, so we can go ahead and get started with introducing myself. My name is Laura Strait. I am a registered dietitian. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been a dietitian for, I'm looking, probably 7 years now. Passed my test back in almost 8 years, so 2013. And I worked in several different settings. I started out in food service management, worked in long-term care for several years, did some consulting, and now I work as a public health dietitian, generally speaking, at the Aliveness Project here in Minneapolis. And I've been here for 3 years. And I wanted to share a little bit more about nutrition and HIV because I know when I was a student and when I was an intern, I think I had like one lecture on HIV specifically. And I went from having maybe one patient in all of my years of practice that had been HIV positive to now literally all of mine are. So I wanted to talk about it and, spread some awareness about nutritional considerations and policy considerations when it comes to people living with HIV. So a little bit of history of where I work. I work at the Aliveness Project. You can find us at aliveness.org. Like I said, we are just in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but there's a lot of other organizations like us. we call them ASOs, or AIDS service organizations, and they're generally funded through all kinds of human services grants, but ours specifically is funded through the Ryan White programs, and I will talk a little bit more about that as well coming up here. But the Aliveness Project started in 1985, and it started as a congregate meal program. It wasn't exactly called that, but that's pretty much what it was. There was a group of HIV positive men who were living in the Twin Cities and would get together and do potlucks and share resources and share information, because we've all been through a pandemic in the last year, and for a lot of the folks here at Aliveness, this isn't the first time they've been unsure of what's going on with their health, not sure where the information is going to come from, and it was really a good way to foster community, to foster resources, and to foster sharing a meal with others. So that's truly been kind of the basis of Aliveness, and it's expanded a ton from there. And that's, like I said, our longest program is our congregate meal program. We're still running that today. We also have expanded since then into doing a food shelf. So we have a shopping model food shelf that anyone who's living with HIV in Minnesota can access, as well as our meal program. And both of those really focus a lot, not only on community, but focus on personal choice, focus on making it as much like a shopping experience as possible. That if you're in a grocery store, like if you're in a co-op, and making those healthy foods available. The biggest need we've found over the years from these nutrition programs is access. It's all of this nutrition counseling and stuff we do doesn't necessarily equate to anything if we can't give people the access we need. So kind of those core services of the food shelf and meal program allow the folks coming here to access the healthy foods that we talk about in our nutrition counseling sessions. So that being said, I also do individual nutrition counseling here. We do several different, I really will talk about anything that people need. I have people who are diabetic, have kidney disease, have special needs based on those. A really big trend now is aging in HIV. This is kind of the first generation of people living with HIV that is aging and not dying from HIV, but rather getting chronic illness, needing to learn to manage it so they don't die from those chronic diseases. So I have lots of clients that come in for help with their diabetes, their renal disease, their high blood pressure, their heart disease, really a lot of the chronic disease we see with the general population. So yeah, those are kind of the big three services we do as far as nutrition goes here. We also have things like case management, testing, outreach, housing, all needs of people living with HIV, but I really focus specifically on those nutrition programs. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about is kind of the bi-directional relationship between nutrition status and HIV status, right? So a poor nutrition status can affect the HIV disease progression, and HIV can also affect your nutritional status. So it's important to control both, right? So while I focus on nutrition programs, we also, through those nutrition programs, are connecting with folks and making sure that they're going to the doctor, staying retained in care, achieving viral suppression. And through that, we know that people who are undetectable as far as their viral load goes are unable to transmit the virus to others. So that's how we end the epidemic. We'll come back to that a little bit more later as well. So essentially, a little HIV super high level overview. I know a lot of you have had courses in it. Mine was pretty limited, but it'd be awesome if not everyone had that same experience prior to becoming a dietitian. So essentially, the HIV virus attaches to the CD4 cells. and infects them. And as those CD4 cells drop, as they get infected and die, the body's ability to fight infections declines. The AIDS diagnosis happens when a CD4 level drops below 200. And it's basically the most important laboratory indicator of immune system function. And it's the strongest predictor of HIV progression. So the two of the things I'm going to talk about are the viral load, and that's the amount of virus in the blood. Again, a lot of these words are coming back in our vocabulary during COVID. And viral suppression, which is that level where the virus is undetectable in someone's blood, which can be achieved through daily antiretroviral therapy, those ARV drugs that we see. And that's the number one goal of those drugs, is to get to that undetectable level, so it's untransmittable to other people. Yeah, so I talked about that bidirectional status of HIV and nutrition. So how does HIV affect our nutrition status? It can show as anorexia, nausea, taste changes, mouth sores, dentition issues, cognitive impairment or depression, unstable housing, transportation, and poverty. Those are the big three that I have seen more than anything else here. Is access is the biggest barrier to intake. We have a lot of folks struggling with being unhoused, a lot of folks struggling with having nowhere to store their food safely, a lot of folks having trouble getting here, right? So we've had periods in the last year where the buses were shut down. So how do I get somewhere to get my food, even if it's available to me? So all of those things are things that we address here at the Aliveness Project, but they're barriers to nutrition. And all those things need to be addressed before they come here, right? So a lot of times we say housing first. And that's a little bit broader, but if you don't have anywhere to live, getting healthy food from the grocery store is not going to be your main priority. If you don't have a place to prepare it, you're not going to be able to do anything with it once you have it. So finding those options that will work for the communities we serve, and that's why our congregate meal program has been so successful. And we'll talk a little bit about COVID changes in the last year, because it has looked really different here in the last year in Aliveness. But just having a place to go to eat, because you might not be able to store it when you get home. The other thing it can do is reduce the absorption of nutrients, the HIV virus. So generally speaking, it's caused by inflammation from the HIV infection itself, opportunistic infections. Sometimes antiretroviral drugs will cause some absorption issues depending on which one you're on. And from that, just kind of a diarrhea. A lot of folks will experience some digestive issues with the combination of medicine and potentially inflammation from the HIV itself or other opportunistic infections. So you may have heard of HIV wasting or AIDS wasting disease. That is defined as an unintentional weight loss of over 10% of the body weight. So not everyone has that. And it can be accompanied by many things, including the virus itself, caused by many things, including the virus itself, much like I talked about before. I actually don't see it a lot. I know it when you see movies and pictures and stuff from the early days of HIV and AIDS, you see a lot of those clearly malnourished folks that visibly had wasting, and I don't see it a lot anymore. I see here and there, but we also see a lot of lipodystrophy. I would say I see a lot more lipodystrophy because as a side effect of some of those life-saving drugs, folks experience a redistribution of fat, often settling in kind of that abdominal area where we know increases our risk of a lot of chronic diseases as well. So nutrition care as part of the comprehensive care plan, along with those antiretroviral drugs. It can improve resistance to infection and complications. It can avoid unintended weight loss or body changes. It can minimize the symptoms associated with HIV and lessen the side effects of the medications. Delays the disease progression. Manages and helps manage co-infections and improve the quality of life. So essentially, when I'm making if I were to make a general care plan for someone living with HIV, high level, I don't know a ton about them. It looks a lot like just a general healthy guidelines for any client, any American. So we follow the dietary guidelines for Americans, or the MyPlate guidelines. Want to make sure we're consuming adequate calories and protein. Managing the side effects of the antiretroviral medications is a big one. That looks a little bit different for everyone. We know medications don't affect everyone exactly the same, and these ones especially are notorious for having a plethora of side effects depending on who you are and how your body reacts to them. Often we encourage the small frequent meals to help with nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or anorexia. Drinking plenty of fluids to help with constipation or diarrhea. Spices, lemon, salt for taste changes. And working really closely with a pharmacist. I work really closely with some HIV specialty pharmacists here in Minneapolis to learn about those specific drugs and what those specific side effects might be that we want to work with people with. Food safety is a big one too. If you have a compromised immune system, if your HIV is not undetectable, it is detectable. Food and waterborne diseases are going to be way more common for you too. So not only in our food programs do we focus really strongly on food safety, but we teach it too. So where you see nutrition professionals like myself providing care for people living with HIV, everywhere. Inpatient, outpatient settings, community-based organizations like this one, and other settings as well. And I talked a little bit about funding at the start here. And our nutrition programs are funded through the Ryan White HIV/AIDS program. So it's delivered by HRSA all over the country. It works with cities, states, community-based organizations to provide primary medical care and essential support services. So essential support services are what these nutrition programs are considered for more than 500,000 uninsured or underinsured people living with HIV per year. 2020 is the last funding number I have, and it was funded at $2.39 billion. And actually 1 in 2 people living with HIV in the United States receive Ryan White funded services. So it's a lot. It's a pretty prevalent program. And I saw that Noreen had asked how many participants we have. Here at Aliveness, anyone who is living with HIV in Minnesota is eligible. We are in the 8,000 or something member range, but I would say for not everyone uses it all the time. It's kind of a when you need it, you'll be here to get your resources. I have an MNT caseload that fluctuates around the 100 to 150 clients, but not everyone has needs every single month. Sometimes I don't hear from folks for 6 months. It's really just based on what their needs are. It's a very needs-based caseload. I have people that come every week, and then, like I said, some I don't check in with more than every 6 months. Especially for our meal program, there's a lot of variability too. So it just, we have seen a lot of increase in both meals and food shelf needs during the last year during COVID. And I wanted to do a quick little bit on COVID-19 and HIV. We know we still don't know a ton about COVID-19 either, but current, although limited data shows people living with HIV who are on effective treatment, so that's those antiretroviral drugs, have the same risk for acquiring COVID-19 as people who do not have HIV, which is surprising. A lot of kind of general consensus was we should be doing, we should consider this a high risk group, right? Because they're effectively immunosuppressed, but they're not acquiring it at increased levels like we would have expected. There's some theories, but there's really no solid science out there as to why that's happening. One of the theories I've heard is that they're already on antiretroviral drugs, so maybe some viral protection is through that, but we really don't know. It's still so much of an unknown as far as COVID goes. Older adults and people of any age who have serious underlying medical conditions are at increased risk for severe illness, and that does include people with HIV, particularly those that have a low CD4 cell count and are not on effective HIV treatment. So, as far as our services go in the last year during the pandemic, we shifted pretty quickly back in March 2020 to a to-go model. So folks were able to get bags of food, bags of toiletries, paper goods, that kind of stuff that we provide in the food shelf, as well as several, usually 3 or 4 at a time, to-go meals that they could take with them to wherever they're going, and not have to be in the space and be able to socially distance and maintain all of that. The challenge is that, like I said earlier, our programs are based on being a community center. They're all about community and relating to each other and learning from each other. So it's been a challenging year as far as that goes, and a lot of people are really missing that part. We have started our shopping model in the food shelf again. We've done some outdoor seating for our meal program, and we're starting to talk about what opening our cafeteria again looks like, because we really want to get back there, because connecting people to resources and each other are the two big ones here. So some of the questions, I'll just go through and look at these. I talked about how many participants we have. We say a lot, people use Aliveness when they need Aliveness. So we have people that have been coming for years and years and years. We have people that come in when they're kind of in crisis. They need housing, they need case management, they have no food, and then they get back on their feet and we don't see them again. The oldest HIV positive patient that I have seen, that's a really good question. I have folks that are late 70s, possibly early 80s. But again, it's folks they're dying of diseases of old age rather than HIV itself, which as far as HIV goes is a really big step. Managing nutrition related symptoms caused by medication management. Yep, I talked about that a little bit. Not only are a lot of these folks on pretty intense medication regimens, as far as those antiretroviral drugs go, we talk a lot about polypharmacy and stuff interacting, but from just a basic standpoint, that's a lot of stuff to have, especially if you have an empty stomach. you're gonna get some reflux, you're gonna get some GI issues. So we do talk a lot about specifically how different drugs affect people. And that's one of those things I hope, as we do more and more research into HIV drugs, that they get better and that they don't make people feel as nauseous and sick. And that's not everybody, but it is a lot of people do complain of that. Developing menus for the meal program. Quick answer is yes. I do some menu development. We also have a chef here who helps me with a lot of that stuff. Like I said, in this last year, our chef has been so amazing and creative and been able to make stuff work that people can take it home safely. That's been like our biggest concern, and the food quality is still really awesome. So I've been really impressed at our kitchen staff's ability to adapt and be able to provide wholesome meals that meet the guidelines and have them in a to-go format. It's been really amazing. So I review them. I don't develop them myself, but I do review them and make sure that they meet the dietary guidelines. We also have a healthy food policy. where we will not buy foods that don't meet the healthy foods policy, but we get so many donations here. We get a lot of retail rescue from some local stores. We get some Whole Foods. We get some Target. That will give us retail rescue. So for those, we, you know, go through, and we don't always know what we're going to get for folks that have worked in retail rescue. But as far as purchasing goes, we only purchase foods that we consider to be healthful for the population. And yeah, I think that's kind of the overview of what I have. I'm just taking a look at my comments here. Are there any other questions regarding the Aliveness Project, regarding people living with HIV? Cool. Well, yeah, I really wanted to share, you know, especially some of the changes we've made in the last year, because Aliveness has looked so different, and just it's mirrored so much. This pandemic that we've had this last year has mirrored a lot of parts for people that they saw in the 80s when HIV kind of, I don't want to say came on the scene, when people started getting HIV, they didn't know what was happening. They weren't sure how it was spread. They didn't know what they had to do to be safe and protect themselves. And just, you know, fear, stigma, politics, all that kind of stuff came into play. So it's been a really hard year here. For a lot of people, it's been kind of re-traumatizing, especially for long-term survivors. But the thing that's really cool about the Aliveness Project is it was named that way because they didn't want to talk about people that were dying from HIV. They wanted to talk about people that were living with HIV. So that's why we now use the terminology of people living with HIV rather than just anything else. You know, we're people and they live with HIV. They're not defined by their illness or their HIV status. Another question, congregate meals. Yeah, is it kind of like a soup kitchen? Yes. So I compare it more to almost like a school cafeteria setup. Like we have a steam table, we have several different options, but yes, you know, people don't have to pay. All of that is funded through the Ryan White programs for folks who are eligible for that. For folks who come here that may not be, we do a lot of additional fundraisers, different grants to cover those differences, and that the only people that don't qualify are people that would be you know, above the income level to qualify, but we focus a lot on people that come here, making sure that they're linked to care in the HIV care continuum as far as their eligibility goes too. So every time someone comes here to get a service, we check to see if they've been to the doctor in the last 6 months. The reason we do that is because we want to have them engaged in care, getting on medication, and becoming untransmittable. As a nonprofit organization, are there events like fundraisers or galas you do? Yeah, our biggest fundraiser is called Dining Out for Life. And Dining Out for Life is actually nationwide, but we do one here in Minnesota. What we do is we partner with restaurants. We just did an in-person one again this year. Last year we did it virtually. And they give a certain amount from those restaurants back to the Aliveness Project. We have ambassadors that are both our staff, our members, our board, all of that kind of stuff to talk about the Aliveness Project and what we do. We have one this year that's new that we just kind of put under our belt called the Red Ribbon Ride, and that one's a bike ride through northern Minnesota. And like I said, that's the first year that's kind of fallen under Aliveness's sphere, but we're doing that one this year too, so we're really excited about that. How many do you feed at these meals? Is it only dinner every day? So pre-COVID, we were doing 2 meals a day, both lunch and dinner. On Fridays we did breakfast, and on Saturdays we did brunch. Per meal, oh my gosh, I don't even remember back when we used to. It's hard to remember pre-COVID. We would sometimes see like 80 people when it was busy. It'd be like 40 to 80. It really just depends on the day. It depends on the weather. It depends on what's going on with transportation, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we did offer it every day right now. We are doing 3 days a week, and that's where we do that distribution where they can do a shopping in the food shelf, but we're still distributing meals to go. Hoping to get back to at least 5 days a week this year. But we're still working on that transition as we can get more folks vaccinated and feel more comfortable congregating again. And yeah, like I talked about a little bit before, there's a lot of community organizations like us, but so much in practice, in any setting, you'll come across people who are living with HIV, and yeah, I just really encourage you to adopt that terminology of people living with HIV, to reduce stigma. There's people at this organization that say HIV doesn't kill people, stigma kills people, so just always using person-centered language is really important when working with people living with HIV. So with that, unless there's any more questions, I think I'm going to sign off. Andrew shared all of my social channels, but you can find me at Laura Strait 21 on Instagram and Twitter. My Facebook is Laura Strait. I will also post it on the board for this event. But if you have any other questions, please reach out to me on there. I'd love to chat more. I'd love to see more dietitians working specifically with people with HIV. In Minnesota right now, there's 2 of us, so it would be exciting to keep this momentum going and have everyone be able to use it in their practice. Thanks for having me.